A medieval monk freezes on a cold stone balcony, his eyes fixed on a sky rippling with silent fire. He sees dragons, or perhaps the banners of an approaching angelic army, painted in light he cannot name. This was the reality for countless people across 1,000 years, whenever the aurora borealis descended far south from its polar home. We are about to embark on a journey through 25 historic medieval aurora sightings, from the Dark Ages to the dawn of science. By the end, you will possess a hidden key that unlocks both the fears of the ancient world and the furious energy of our own sun. These are not mere ghost stories, they are data points. Each terrified chronicle of blood-red skies and clashing celestial warriors helps modern astrophysicists map the sun's violent, centuries-long heartbeat. Why did a glowing sky over Baghdad shake an empire, and how did a mysterious light guide or terrify the very first pilgrims in America? The answers are written in the panic of monks and the precision of kings. When you see those lights dancing today, do you feel wonder or a deeper, older whisper of awe? The year was 773. In the quiet scriptoriums of England, monks dipped their quills to record a terror that had painted the night. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, that great historical ledger of early England, notes for that year a sky aflame with what it called blood-red crosses and fiery banners. This was not a gentle shimmering green, but a violent, ominous crimson wash across the heavens. To the Saxon people living in a patchwork of kingdoms under constant threat, this could only be a divine message and a terrifying one. The chroniclers, who saw the hand of God in every storm and the devil in every misfortune, wove this celestial event directly into the fabric of earthly fear. Were these bloody banners a warning of coming invasion, perhaps the shadow of Viking longships yet unknown? Or were they a sign of divine wrath for the sins of the people, a call to repentance written in light? This sighting is a perfect window into the medieval mind. There was no separation between the natural world and the spiritual one. A strange light in the sky was a direct communique, its meaning urgent and its interpretation a matter of survival. Imagine standing in a thatched village, the familiar constellations erased by this silent, rippling red. It felt like the sky itself was wounded or worse, arming for battle. This record from 773 is more than an old weather report. It is a fossilized piece of human anxiety, proving that the aurora's beauty was often drowned out by the deafening drumbeat of superstition. Nearly 70 years later and thousands of miles to the east, the sky delivered another stunning performance, this time witnessed by some of the most brilliant minds on Earth. It was the year 839 in the heart of the Abbasid Caliphate. Baghdad was a glittering center of the world, a city of scholars where the works of ancient Greece were being translated. Advanced mathematics was flourishing, and astronomy was a precise science. Observatories dotted the city, their instruments mapping the heavens with an accuracy Europe wouldn't match for centuries. Yet, even here, the cosmos presented a mystery that no chart could explain. The great historian Al-Tabari recorded it plainly, a sky like fire burning for successive nights. Imagine the scene, the intricate geometric patterns of the palace architecture silhouetted against a heavens that seemed to bleed light. For the common people, it was surely a terrifying omen, but for the court astronomers, the Munajiman, it was a profound puzzle. They knew the fixed stars, the wandering planets, the predictable cycles of the moon. This was none of those things. This was an atmospheric anomaly, a crackling, shifting veil of color that defied their careful calculations. In this sophisticated society, the interpretation of such an event was a matter of high stakes. Omens were read for the Caliph al-Mu'tasim. Was this fiery sky a portent of his military campaigns, a sign of divine favor for the empire's expansion, or a warning of instability to come? The very fact it was meticulously recorded in the annals of history shows its weight. It wasn't just weather, it was a political and spiritual event. Modern scientists looking back at al-Tabari's account see something else, a crucial data point. For Baghdad, situated at a latitude of about 33 degrees north, to witness such a vivid display, the solar storm that caused it must have been monstrous. This was no faint glow on the northern horizon. This was a conflagration directly overhead. That fiery sky over 8th century Baghdad is a testament to a sun capable of fury so intense it could make itself seen deep into the medieval world's most enlightened civilization, reminding even the greatest scholars that some lights in the sky remain beyond our understanding. A century after Baghdad's fiery nights, the northern lights blazed again over a very different landscape, a muddy field in northern England where the fate of a nation was being decided. The year was 937, and King Aethelstan of Wessex stood against a colossal alliance of Vikings, Scots, and Strathclyde Britons. This was the Battle of Brunanburh, a clash so monumental that chroniclers called it the greatest slaughter since the Angles and Saxons first crossed the sea. And woven into the memory of that brutal day is the ghost of an aurora. Later sagas and chronicles written to cement Aethelstan's legacy speak of strange lights in the sky preceding the conflict, a celestial sign interpreted as God favoring the Christian king. The famous Old English poem, The Battle of Brunanburh, immortalizes the victory with vivid, roaring language. It describes the sun as a glorious candle, the sky's gem, but also speaks of the battlefield gleaming with weapons, the land stained dark. While not a direct description of an aurora, the poem's intense focus on light and dark, on the heavens watching the carnage below, creates a powerful metaphorical sky that aligns perfectly with how such an event would be remembered. A terrifying, beautiful light show before a battle becomes, in retrospect, the banner of divine will. Modern researchers now perform a fascinating kind of detective work on these ancient texts. By cross-referencing the date with ice core samples and tree ring data, which can preserve traces of intense solar radiation, they look for evidence of a major solar storm around 937. A confirmed aurora would transform the saga's omen from mere propaganda into a documented atmospheric phenomenon that truly did hang over the heads of the fighting men. Imagine that scene, not from a Hollywood film, but as it was, warriors on both sides glancing up from their shield walls at a sky rippling with unnatural color, each side doubtless claiming the light as their own. That perceived divine endorsement became part of England's founding myth, proving that in the medieval world the sky was never just a backdrop, it was an active participant in human history, its light a weapon as potent as any sword. A bishop's quill scratched across parchment, recording a celestial war. Nearly a century after Brunanburh, in the year 973, the learned Bishop Thietmar-of-Merseburg looked to the heavens and saw a battle. His Chronicles, a detailed history of the Ottoman Holy Roman Empire, notes with sober alarm the appearance of signs in the heavens. He described blood-red lances and warriors clashing in the sky, a vivid tableau of violence painted in light. This is the classic aurora militaris, a recurring motif where the human mind, desperate for pattern, interprets the shimmering curtains and rays of the aurora as armies, shields, and spears. Our brains are wired to find familiar shapes in chaos, to see faces in clouds or figures in shadows. For a medieval observer, the sheer scale and motion of a major aurora could only be passed as the activity of giants, angels, or armies locked in eternal combat. Thietmar was no superstitious peasant. He was a high-ranking churchman and scholar, yet even his educated mind defaulted to this powerful, terrifying narrative. His world was one of tangible spiritual warfare, where demons and angels were as real as the Saxons and Slavs on the empire's borders. A sky full of crimson lances was not a beautiful abstraction, it was a direct report from the front lines of a cosmic conflict. This sighting arrives in the shadow of the millennium, a time of profound apocalyptic anxiety as the year 1000 approached. many across Christendom believed it would bring the end of days, the final battle between good and evil foretold in Scripture. So when Bishop Thietmar looked up, he wasn't just seeing an atmospheric phenomenon, he was witnessing a potential rehearsal for Armageddon. The psychological impact on the common people who would have heard this account from their priests is hard to overstate. If a bishop saw warriors in the sky, then the walls between heaven and earth were truly thinning. The dread was palpable, a collective holding of breath, waiting to see if the phantom armies would descend. Thietmar's Chronicle gives us more than a date. It gives us the emotional fingerprint of an age, the specific fear that a shimmering light could be the first flash of a divine sword. Across the world, in the refined courts of Heian Japan, a different set of eyes watched the same restless sky. The official chronicle Nihon Karyoku records for the year 980 a strange phenomenon, vapors of red or white color appearing in the heavens. In the delicate aesthetic universe of Heian courtiers, where a misplaced poem could ruin a reputation, every natural event was a potential symbol. A red vapor was not merely a color, it was a coded message. Crimson was often associated with disruption, with fire and blood, a possible omen of conflict or calamity. A white vapor, however, might be seen as more auspicious, a sign of purity or perhaps celestial approval. The interpretation was everything, a matter for court diviners to debate, as the fate of the state could theoretically hang in the balance of a colored sky. Imagine the scene: aristocrats on wooden verandas overlooking exquisite gardens, their silk robes illuminated not by moonlight, but by an eerie, silent glow that defied the orderly patterns of the stars they knew. This was a breach in the cosmic decorum, and it demanded an explanation. At nearly the same time, in the magnificent imperial court of China's Song dynasty, professional astrologers were performing the same urgent work with even greater bureaucratic precision. Official court histories note observations of red clouds unfurling across the night sky. For the Chinese imperial system, the cosmos was a direct mirror of the earthly realm. The emperor ruled by the mandate of heaven, and any irregularity in the heavens was a direct commentary on his virtue and governance. A sky bleeding red was a serious matter. The court astrologers, the Simashi, had one of the most high-pressure jobs in the world. Their task was to observe, record, and interpret these signs, providing counsel to the emperor on whether he needed to change policies, perform rituals, or prepare for unrest. Their records are remarkably clinical, noting the date, the duration, the color, and the shape. This was not poetic fancy, it was state-sponsored data collection driven by existential fear. The fact that both Japan and China, two sophisticated but independent civilizations, logged these vivid events in the same late 10th century period is not a coincidence. It is a global witness statement. Modern astrophysicists treasure these parallel accounts. The precise dates from the Song court annals and the Japanese chronicles provide triangulated data points, confirming that a solar storm of extraordinary magnitude occurred and was visible at mid-latitudes across Eurasia. These aren't just omens, they are coordinates in time, helping science map the sun's ancient tantrums. When a Heian noble saw a red vapor and a Song astrologer charted red clouds, they were, without knowing it, collaborating on a single celestial report, their pens separated by a sea but linked by the same furious solar wind. The year 1098 found desperate men camped outside the walls of Antioch. The First Crusade, that great armed pilgrimage, was on the brink of total collapse. Starvation, disease, and Turkish skirmishes had whittled down the Christian army, and their siege of the mighty city had stalled. Then the sky spoke. Multiple chronicles of the crusade, including the anonymous Gesta Francorum, tell of marvelous lights appearing in the heavens. To the exhausted knights and foot soldiers, this was not a scientific curiosity, it was a direct and desperately needed message. They interpreted these shimmering veils and radiant columns as the armies of saints George and Demetrius and Maurice, descending from heaven to fight alongside them. The aurora became a celestial reinforcement, a sign that God had not abandoned his warriors. For the clergy traveling with the army, this interpretation was a gift, a potent tool to revive flagging morale. The marvelous lights were preached as divine validation, proof that their brutal campaign was a sacred mission blessed by the heavens themselves. This was propaganda written in light, and it worked. The psychological boost was immense, helping to sustain the Crusaders through the horrific months that followed, culminating in their eventual chaotic capture of the city. Now consider the view from inside Antioch's walls. Did the Muslim defenders look up at the same eerie glow? While detailed Islamic accounts of this specific night are less prominent, the cultural interpretation would have been starkly different. In the Islamic tradition, celestial phenomena were also signs from God, but their meaning was contextual. A strange, beautiful light during a siege by foreign invaders might be seen as a warning of trial or a call to steadfastness, but certainly not as a sign of favor for the besiegers. The same sky, the same physics, painted two completely opposing realities on the ground. One army saw angelic hosts, the other saw an ominous atmospheric disturbance. This is the ultimate power of the medieval aurora. Its meaning was a blank canvas upon which human fear and faith painted their deepest hopes and darkest dreads. Visualize that scene for a moment, not as a dry historical fact, but as a living night. The cold air outside Antioch, the smell of smoke and unburied dead, the glint of a strange greenish light reflecting off a knight's nasal helmet or the taut canvas of a command tent. In that reflection, you see not just light, but the very engine of history powered by the stories people tell themselves when faced with the unknown. The sagas of Iceland do not whisper, they roar with the voice of fire and ice. In the stark, beautiful prose of the Njál saga, written in the 13th century, the sky itself becomes an actor in the human drama. It speaks of a time when a great fire was seen in the heavens, a blaze so intense that it seemed as if the sky itself was burning. To the Norse mind, this was not a vague marvel, it was a specific and potent symbol. Their entire cosmology was framed by Ragnarök, the prophesied twilight of the gods, a final cataclysm where the world would be consumed in flame. A sky on fire was not just an aurora, it was a possible rehearsal for the end of all things, a glimpse of the wolf Fenrir breaking his chains. Another vital source, the King's Mirror, a 13th century Norwegian educational text, offers a more detailed yet equally mystical explanation. It describes the Northern Lights or Norðurljós as one of the great wonders of the northern world. The author ponders their nature, suggesting they could be fires encircling the outer ocean, or perhaps most poetically, the glow from the shields and armor of the Valkyries, the choosers of the slain. Imagine that interpretation under the vast Arctic sky. For a Viking sailor guiding his longship by the stars, the sudden shimmering of green and red across the blackness might indeed look like the gleam of celestial warriors gathering above the waves, selecting which heroes would fall in the next day's battle. This was a culture that lived intimately with the elements, their survival dependent on reading the wind, the waves, and the stars with lethal accuracy. Their observations of the Norðurljós were thus incredibly precise, noting its colors, its movements, its frequency. They were practical naturalists and profound mythmakers all at once. The aurora was woven into their daily reality and their deepest fears, a beautiful and terrifying reminder that the boundaries between their world, the world of the gods and the world of the dead, were as thin and shifting as the lights themselves. When we read these accounts today, we are not just reading folklore, we are receiving eyewitness reports from the edge of the known world, recorded by people for whom the night sky was a living storybook, its pages written in rippling flame. A great church beam carved from light rested upon the night sky. That is how the Benedictine monk Matthew Paris saw it in 1239, recording the vision in his monumental Chronica Majora. As a chronicler at St. Albans Abbey, his duty was to document the world's events for posterity, and this celestial wonder demanded his pen. He described a sign in the sky of wonderful size and shape, like a great church beam, a solid, tangible object of light. His choice of analogy is a perfect window into his mind. He reached for the most impressive man-made structure he knew, the massive wooden beam supporting the abbey's own roof, to explain this impossible pillar in the heavens. It was an attempt to ground the unearthly in the familiar, to measure the divine with earthly tools. This was not a sky full of clashing armies, but a single, solemn architectural marvel, suggesting a more structured, if no less awe-inspiring, interpretation. The political air in England at that time was thick with tension. King Henry III was a weak monarch, his reign plagued by baronial unrest and financial mismanagement. The kingdom was drifting toward the crisis that would eventually force the provisions of Oxford upon him. In such an atmosphere, any major celestial event was instantly politicized. Was this great beam a divine pillar of support for the troubled king, or a heavenly rebuke, a glaring spotlight on his failing rule? Matthew Paris, ever observant of court affairs, would have understood that his own record of this sign could be read both ways. His chronicle itself is a treasure for modern science, not just for its content but for its consistency. Monastic scriptoria like St. Albans were the data centers of the medieval world, producing dated, sequential records with a discipline that secular histories often lack. When Paris notes a date, we can trust it, and he didn't just write, he illustrated. His manuscripts are filled with marginal drawings of stars, comets, and strange lights, a visual diary of a sky he believed was in constant conversation with the earth. To see his simple sketch of a beam in the sky next to his careful script is to witness the moment of observation itself, frozen in ink and wonder. That single architectural analogy, a church beam, does more than describe a shape. It bridges two worlds, connecting the sacred space of the abbey with the vast, mysterious cathedral of the night. Far from the monastic chronicles of Europe, the meticulous scribes of the Goryeo dynasty were watching the same restless sky. In the year 1314, the official court history known as the Goryosa notes a sudden and alarming phenomenon, a red vapor illuminating the night. This was not a casual observation, it was a formal state record, and the choice of words is precise. In the Confucian worldview that governed Korea, the heavens and the earth were in constant, responsive harmony. Anomalies in the sky were not random weather, they were direct communications, critiques of the king's virtue, and warnings about the stability of the realm. A red vapor or honki was a serious omen, often associated with fire, warfare, or yang energy run amok. The appearance of such a sign would have triggered an immediate bureaucratic response. Court astronomers, the Guanza, would have been summoned to verify the observation, noting its duration, shape, and intensity. Senior officials and Confucian scholars would then debate its meaning, searching for lapses in royal conduct or flaws in administration that might have provoked this celestial rebuke. The king himself might be expected to perform rituals of atonement, to examine his policies, or to prepare for potential unrest. The sky was in effect the highest censor of the government. Nearly 50 years later, in 1363, another spectacular event was recorded with even greater detail. This was a period of deep turmoil for Goryeo, with internal power struggles and the crumbling Yuan dynasty next door. Against this backdrop of political anxiety, the aurora's appearance was a lightning rod for fear. The records describe the lights with terminology that speaks to their awe-inspiring scale, using the character Kai, a word that encompasses vapor, energy, and ether. This is the same concept found in Chinese records, reflecting a shared philosophical understanding of the cosmos as a dynamic system of flowing energies. A disruption in the celestial Kai meant a disruption in the earthly order. Imagine the scene in the royal palace, officials rushing to observatory platforms, their robes lit by an eerie, silent glow that defied all charts and calendars. The scribe's brush would move carefully, capturing the event not as a wonder but as a critical state affair. The survival of these records in the Gloriosa is a gift to modern science, providing two clean, dated data points from a sophisticated observational tradition. When we read red vapor illuminating the night, we are not just reading an omen, we are accessing a calibrated report. The Korean Chronicles, with their Confucian gravity, strip away the dragons and angels, leaving us with something equally powerful: the stark anxiety of a civilization that believed the sky was watching, and it was keeping a very strict ledger. While Korea's scribes recorded a red vapor, the skies over a shattered Europe erupted in a symphony of terror. The year 1363 witnessed one of the most widely documented auroral events of the Middle Ages, a celestial firestorm seen from England to Italy. In the wake of the Black Death, which had wiped out half the continent just 15 years prior, and with the 100 Years' War grinding on, the collective psyche was raw, vulnerable, and steeped in apocalyptic dread. When the heavens began to burn, every chronicler saw a reflection of their own world's agony. English accounts, like the Polychronicon, speak of burning spears and lances of fire clashing in the air. French monastic records from Saint Denis describe blood-red crosses appearing at midnight, a sign interpreted by many as divine displeasure with the ongoing war. In Italy, the Florentine chronicler Matteo Villani wrote of a great brightness in the sky that lasted for hours, filling the citizens with foreboding. This was not a single observer's dream, it was a continent-wide witness to an atmospheric convulsion. For a population still digging mass graves, a blood-red cross was not a beautiful abstraction, it was a dire warning, perhaps a reminder of the wrath that had already descended. For soldiers and kings, the burning spears might signal more battles to come, a celestial endorsement of their cause or a condemnation of their enemies. The same light was woven into every local narrative, each culture tailoring the omen to fit its specific fears. Modern astrophysicists now look at this dense cluster of reports with profound interest. By plotting the locations of these sightings on a map from London to Paris to Florence, they can perform a kind of medieval triangulation. The geographic spread tells them something crucial: the auroral oval, that ring of light normally confined to the polar regions, had swollen monstrously southward. The fact that it was seen so vividly and described so similarly across such a vast area confirms the incredible power of the solar storm that caused it. Visualize that map of Europe not with modern borders, but with the faint glow of a dozen monastic candles, each one representing a scribe's hand trembling as he recorded the same impossible night. In a village still hollowed out by plague, a farmer looks up at the crimson crosses and feels not wonder, but a cold certainty that the pestilence is returning on wings of light. That is the true power of the 1363 Aurora. It held up a mirror to a broken world, and every shattered piece saw its own reflection in the flames above. Rome was a city of marble and ambition, still echoing with the creative explosion of the High Renaissance, when the night sky above it caught fire in early April 1520. Across Italy, from the crowded piazzas of Florence to the quiet vineyards of the countryside, people looked up to see a magnificent aurora, its curtains of light described in Chronicles as a burning of the sky. The timing was poignant, almost too perfect. Just days later, on April 6th, the brilliant painter Raphael Sanzio, at the height of his fame and power, died suddenly at the age of 37. The connection was irresistible to the human heart. Later writers and poets, seeking meaning in the cruel snuffing of such a luminous talent, wove the two events together into a beautiful legend. They said the heavens themselves had ignited in a final, glorious salute, that the celestial fire which lit the night was a mirror to the creative light leaving the earth. It is a haunting and romantic thought that the sky would mourn an artist, but we must separate the poetry from the parchment. The historical records are clear on two separate facts. A widespread oral display occurred and Raphael died. The chroniclers of the time noted them independently, not as cause and effect, but as two significant events in a single month. This distinction is actually a sign of a subtle but profound shift. We are now in the full flush of the Renaissance, an age where humanism and a budding scientific curiosity were beginning to change how people observed the world. While superstition was far from dead, there was a new impulse to describe the phenomenon itself, not just its presumed meaning. Accounts from this period start to focus more on the colors, the duration, the movement of the lights, with a touch less immediate insistence on interpreting them as divine wrath or angelic armies. They were becoming marvels to document, not just omens to decode. So while the legend of Raphael's sky-bound farewell is a testament to his lasting impact on the human imagination, the aurora itself was something else, a spectacular atmospheric event witnessed by a society slowly, hesitantly, beginning to look at the heavens with wonder as well as fear. A German humanist named Conrad Lycosthenes gave the world a catalogue of cosmic dread. In 1557, he published his monumental work, the Prodigium Esse Ostentorum Chronicon, a chronicle of prodigies and portents that aimed to compile every strange and miraculous event from the dawn of time to his own era. This was not a dry history, it was a Renaissance bestiary of the bizarre, filled with accounts of comets, monstrous births, rains of blood, and of course, the fiery skies of the aurora. Lycosthenes, working in the scholarly tradition of humanism, scoured ancient and medieval chronicles, pulling together scattered reports of celestial wonders into a single, terrifying volume. His work is invaluable to us today because it acts as a central repository, preserving accounts that might otherwise have been lost. He was less interested in proving the truth of each event than in showcasing the sheer breadth of nature's capacity for the marvelous and the ominous. His book is a snapshot of a transitional mind, a scholar using new tools of compilation to explore an old world still vibrating with supernatural meaning. Flipping through its pages, one finds a specific and chilling entry for the year 1549. Lycosthenes records an aurora seen across Europe, described not as gentle curtains but as a bloody sword hanging in the heavens. This single, visceral image captures the enduring power of the aurora militaris. To a continent still reeling from the Protestant Reformation and incessant warfare, a sword of blood in the sky was not a metaphor, it was a direct and urgent headline. It spoke of divine judgment, of conflict yet to come, of a world perpetually on the edge of a blade. The true revolution, however, was not just in Lycosthenes' compilation, but in the technology that made it possible. The printing press before movable type, such a book would have been a unique treasure, locked in a monastery library. Now it could be reproduced by the hundreds, its woodcut illustrations of flaming skies and celestial battles stamped onto page after page, circulating through the markets and universities of Europe. This mass dissemination did something profound. It standardized the imagery of wonder. People from London to Prague could now see the same depicted bloody sword and recognize it in their own night sky, creating a shared visual language for the uncanny. The press did not kill superstition, it gave it wings, allowing these compiled portents to shape the early modern understanding of nature as a realm of spectacular and often threatening signs. When you look at a woodcut from Lycosthenes' Chronicle, you are seeing more than an old drawing. You are seeing the moment a local terror became a continental phenomenon, printed, bound, and sold as proof that the heavens were forever at war with themselves. The heavens delivered their verdict during the reign of a young queen. In 1560, just 2 years after Elizabeth I ascended a deeply divided throne, a terrifying aurora erupted over England. The chronicler Henry Machen recorded it in his diary with palpable dread, describing how strange and fiery shapes appeared in the sky, causing great fear and wonder among the people. This was not a quiet shimmer, it was a violent, crimson display that many interpreted as a sign of God's wrath. Elizabeth's position was perilously unstable, a Protestant ruler in a Catholic world, her legitimacy constantly questioned. To her enemies, a sky bleeding fire could only mean divine condemnation of her rule, a signal that her reign was an affront to the natural and spiritual order. Every strange light was a potential propaganda tool, a celestial broadside in the ongoing war for the soul of the nation. The public alarm was so intense that it demanded a response, pushing the narrative into the realm of official explanation. Just 4 years later, in 1564, another spectacular display lit up the night. This event would echo far beyond the panic of the moment, finding its way into the very fabric of English culture. Decades later, when William Shakespeare penned his tragedy Hamlet, he placed a memory of that night into the mouth of a soldier. Standing on the battlements of Elsinore, Horatio recalls a time when, a little ere the mightiest Julius fell, the graves stood tenantless and the sheeted dead did squeak and gibber in the Roman streets. And then he delivers the line, "Stars with trains of fire and dews of blood, disasters in the sun." That is a near-perfect description of a brilliant, blood-red aurora with its long streaming rays or trains of fire. Shakespeare, a master of borrowing from life and history, was almost certainly referencing the vivid accounts of the 1564 event or others like it that had become part of collective memory. He understood that a sky on fire was the ultimate shorthand for a world out of joint, a cosmic disturbance that mirrored the political and moral corruption in Denmark's court. So these two Tudor sightings, just a few years apart, tell a complete story. First, the raw, terrifying event that shook a kingdom and threatened a queen. Then its transformation, its sublimation into enduring art. The same phenomenon that caused real political fear in 1560 became, by 1600, a powerful metaphor for existential dread on the London stage. The aurora had moved from the chronicle of current events to the library of human symbols, proving that its light could illuminate not just the night sky, but the deepest anxieties of the human heart. The Great Aurora of September 1580 was a firestorm that painted the entire northern hemisphere. From the palaces of Prague to the temples of Japan, the night sky ignited with such ferocity that its glow was reported even near the equator, a geographical impossibility under normal conditions. This was not a local marvel, it was a global atmospheric seizure triggered by one of the most powerful solar storms in recorded human history. In England, chroniclers wrote of spears and castles of light, while in the Azores, sailors logged a strange crimson haze on the northern horizon. The sheer geographic spread of these accounts, from the high Arctic down to the latitude of Bermuda, tells modern scientists that the Earth's magnetic shield was under a bombardment of unprecedented scale. The auroral oval, that halo of light, had been blown wide open, draping itself across continents. For most who witnessed it, the meaning was clear and terrifying. In a Europe fractured by religious war and with the shadow of Spain's immense power growing longer by the day, a sky blazing with warlike shapes could only be a portent of coming conflict. Many in England, looking up at those celestial spears 8 years before the event, would later recall it as a clear warning of the Spanish Armada. The heavens were issuing a declaration of war written in silent flame. Yet on a small, man-made island between Denmark and Sweden, a very different kind of observer was at work. The astronomer Tycho Brahe, from his magnificent observatory fortress of Uraniborg, trained his great brass quadrant on the spectacle. He did not see omens, he saw data. With a scientist's precision, he recorded the event in his journal, noting the exact colors, the structured movement of the luminous bands, and their position relative to the stars. He described it as a celestial flame, but his language was one of measurement, not myth. This is the profound pivot point this event represents. On one hand, the vast majority of humanity continued the ancient practice of reading their deepest fears into the light. On the other, a lone genius in his isolated castle was pioneering a new way of seeing, stripping the phenomenon of its supernatural baggage to study its physical behavior. Brahe's detailed account is a landmark, arguably one of the first truly scientific descriptions of an aurora. He stood with a foot in both worlds, a man who still believed in a geocentric universe, yet whose meticulous habits of observation would help pave the way for the coming scientific revolution. You can almost see the contrast in the surviving records from that September, the frantic, symbolic woodcuts of castles in the sky sold in city squares, and beside them, Tycho's careful, annotated diagram in the quiet of his study. The same light fell on both, but what each mind reflected back was a measure of how the world was changing. The 1580 aurora was the last great celestial mystery of the medieval mind, and the first major atmospheric puzzle of the scientific age. That same solar fury that lit Tycho Brahe's sky would soon manifest again, this time over the mountains of Korea. The official Joseon Wangjo Silok, the Annals of the Dynasty, records for the year 1602 a night when a fire chariot illuminated the heavens. This is not a vague glow or a simple red vapor. It is a specific dynamic object, a vehicle of flame racing across the firmament. The choice of words is a masterclass in cultural interpretation. In the Confucian worldview, the emperor was the son of heaven, and his virtuous rule maintained cosmic order. A chariot in the sky could be a powerful symbol of this celestial mandate, a vehicle for divine authority. Yet in Korean folk belief, such fiery apparitions could also signal the movement of armies, either celestial or demonic, or presage great social upheaval. The image perfectly captures the aurora's most active forms, those rippling, rayed structures that seem to advance like a procession of luminous wagons. It is a direct parallel to the burning spears of Europe and the warriors of Bishop Thietmar, proving that the human mind, whether in Seoul or Saxony, defaulted to the same familiar, terrifying shapes when confronted with the unknown. What makes this Korean record so uniquely valuable is the extraordinary system that produced it. The Silok were not just chronicles, they were state secrets. Compiled by a dedicated office of historians, the Sago, these annals were written from the king's daily logs and the reports of court astronomers. Once completed, the original copies were stored in locked, fireproof archives in remote mountain fortresses, with access forbidden to even the reigning monarch. This extreme secrecy was designed to prevent political factions from mining past omens to justify present rebellions or to challenge the king's authority. A fire chariot seen decades earlier could become a dangerous weapon in the hands of a rival, so the record was sealed away, a neutral fact preserved for history alone. This bureaucratic rigor gives the 1602 entry a phenomenal weight. It was not written for public consumption or propaganda. It was a confidential state document, making its description arguably more objective, more focused on the phenomenon itself than its immediate political spin. Visualize the scene: a court astronomer on a wooden platform in Seoul, his instruments useless before this silent conflagration, dutifully noting the shape and the time before rushing to make his report. Then see the scribe's brush moving carefully in the archive, committing the fire chariot to a ledger that would be carried under guard into a mountain vault, hidden from the world for centuries. When we read that phrase today, we are bypassing the medieval filter of public fear and accessing a pure, archived moment of awe, a testament to a system that understood the power of the sky and went to great lengths to keep that power under lock and key. A fire chariot in the Korean sky was a state secret, but across the world, a different kind of witness was struggling to survive under a very open heaven. The winter of 1621 was a crucible for the small band of English separatists huddled at Plymouth. Their first harvest was gathered, but the relentless cold of New England was a shock their English bones were not prepared for. As they shivered in their crude houses, staring into the vast, unfamiliar darkness of an American night, the sky itself may have delivered a message. While Governor William Bradford's journal and the account known as Mert's Relation do not explicitly record an aurora, the conditions were ripe for one. We know from European records that the early 1620s saw significant solar activity, and Plymouth sits at a latitude comparable to southern France, a region that had documented vivid displays. It is entirely plausible that during a clear, frigid night, the heavens above the colony ignited. For the pilgrims, a people who saw the hand of providence in every trial and mercy, such a sight would have been profoundly ambiguous. After losing half their number to disease and starvation the previous winter, a sky rippling with silent, ethereal flame could have been interpreted in two starkly different ways. To some, it might have looked like the very fires of hell, a sign that their testing was not yet over, that God's wrath still burned against them in this desolate wilderness. To others, perhaps those more hopeful after the recent peace treaty with Massasoit, it could have been seen as a celestial beacon, a strange and beautiful affirmation that they were not forsaken, that the heavens themselves were illuminating their covenant with this new land. Now consider the view from a Wampanoag village. To the people of the first light who had lived with this sky for millennia, the interpretation would have flowed from an entirely different cosmology. While specific Algonquian beliefs about such phenomena are not fully recorded, many northeastern tribes held that the aurora was the light of great fires in the far north, kindled by ancestors or powerful spirit beings. Some saw it as the dancing of the spirits, a sign of their presence and activity. For them, this was not a new omen, but a known, if rare, feature of the world. The awe would have been familiar, not filtered through the terror of biblical apocalypse. Imagine the scene, the rough-hewn timber of Plymouth's common house stark against a horizon suddenly alive with green and violet waves, the light reflecting off the deep snow and the frozen harbor. Inside, a settler might kneel in fearful prayer. A Wampanoag hunter, seeing the same glow from a ridge, might simply nod in recognition, adding another log to his own fire, connected to the greater one now burning in the sky. This unrecorded potential sighting forces us to confront the layers of meaning we paint onto nature. The same silent light could whisper of damnation to one culture and of ancestral presence to another, a perfect mirror held up to the vast, unbridgeable gulf between the worldviews that met on that snowy shore. A French astronomer looked at the same celestial fire and saw a new beginning. In 1621, the same year the pilgrims may have shivered under an American sky, the scholar Pierre Gassendi trained his telescope on a brilliant auroral display over southern France. He did not see spears or chariots. He saw a phenomenon that demanded a new name, one that would lift it from the realm of terror into the domain of natural philosophy. Drawing on his deep knowledge of classical literature, he christened it the aurora borealis. This was a deliberate, elegant construction, fusing the name of the Roman goddess of dawn, Aurora, with Boreas, the Greek god of the north wind. It was not an omen, it was a description, a northern dawn. This single act of naming was a quiet revolution. For centuries, the language used for these lights was the language of violence and divine judgment, burning spears, bloody crosses, fiery armies. Gassendi's term replaced a scream with a diagnosis. By anchoring the phenomenon in classical mythology rather than biblical prophecy, he subtly shifted its category. It became a subject for investigation, a natural wonder with a pedigree as old as Homer, not a sudden and frightening breach in the cosmic order. Visualize the contrast, the frantic woodcuts of clashing angels sold in the streets, and then Gassendi's careful notes, the words aurora borealis inscribed in a clean, scholarly hand. He was not denying its beauty or power, but he was insisting it belonged to the world, not solely to the heavens. His naming did not end superstition, but it gave science a handle with which to grasp the ungraspable. It created a box in the human mind where this terrifying marvel could be placed, studied, and eventually understood. When you say aurora borealis today, you are speaking Gassendi's language, invoking a dawn from the north, and participating in the moment a mystery began to surrender its secrets to the simple power of a name. The sky blazed with silent fire during a solar slumber. For 3 winters around 1707 to 1709, vivid auroras were reported across Europe, a brilliant paradox that has captivated scientists ever since. The English astronomer Edmund Halley, already famous for his comet, turned his keen mind to these displays, publishing detailed accounts. He described the lights not as omens but as phenomena, noting their magnetic nature and even speculating they were caused by what he called a magnetic effluvium escaping from the Earth's poles. His was a rational voice in an age still prone to superstition, yet the timing of what he witnessed was deeply strange. These years fall squarely within what we now call the Maunder Minimum, a period stretching roughly from 1645 to 1715, when sunspots virtually vanished from the face of the sun. Sunspots are the visible markers of solar magnetic turmoil, and their absence suggested a quiet, dormant star. Conventional wisdom tells us that a quiet sun means fewer solar storms and therefore fewer auroras. So how could such spectacular lights dance during the sun's deepest sleep? This is where historical records like Halley's become priceless data. They force us to reconsider the sun's behavior. Modern astrophysicists now understand that even during a grand minimum, the sun is not completely inert. It can still unleash powerful, concentrated bursts of magnetic energy, like a sleeping giant twitching in a dream. The auroras of 1707 are evidence of those twitches. They tell us that the solar cycle is not a simple on-off switch, but a complex, sometimes erratic heartbeat. When we look at a graph of the Maunder Minimum, that long, deep trough of sunspot numbers, the sightings from those years are like small, defiant peaks poking above the line, reminders that the ancient sky was logging information that only our modern science can fully decode. Halley saw a mystery, but he was also recording a crucial clue, one that helps us map the true, variable temperament of our star. Siberia was a land where the sky spoke every winter night. For the Evenk and Yakut peoples who had lived beneath its vast dome for countless generations, the northern lights were not a rare omen but a familiar neighbor. Their names for it reflected an intimate relationship, speaking of spirit fires, of the dancing souls of ancestors, or of the great reindeer herder in the sky shaking snow from his coat, the crystals glittering down as light. Shamans would sometimes conduct rituals beneath the shimmering curtains, believing the aurora was a bridge to the spirit world, its pulsating energy a conduit for their journeys. This was a perspective born of constant observation, where wonder was woven into the fabric of daily survival. When Russian explorers and settlers pushed eastward in the early 1700s, they brought with them a different lens. Their chronicles from remote outposts are filled with notes of strange celestial fires, described with a mixture of scientific curiosity and old-world dread. They logged the frequency, noting displays that could last for nights on end, and the stunning variety from pale green glows to violent red outbursts that set the entire snowscape ablaze in crimson. For these newcomers, even in the aurora's heartland, it remained an alien and spectacular force. This collision of worldviews was formalized by the most ambitious scientific undertaking of its age, the Great Northern Expedition. Launched by Tsar Peter the Great and lasting from 1733 to 1743, this monumental effort aimed to map Russia's vast eastern frontiers and study everything from geography to ethnography to natural phenomena. Among its ranks was the German historian and naturalist Gerhard Friedrich Müller. As he traveled the punishing Siberian routes, Müller did something revolutionary. He treated the aurora not as a legend but as data. He compiled systematic records noting the date, time, duration, color, and form of each display with a scholar's dispassionate eye. His journals are filled with careful descriptions, classifying shapes into arcs, rays, and coronas, striving to find patterns in the chaos of light. Imagine the scene: a scholar in a fur-lined tent, his inkwell kept from freezing by a small stove, meticulously sketching a radiant band in the margin of his logbook while outside. The very people who guided his sledges shared stories of the sky reindeer's breath. The contrast could not be more profound. For Muller and the expedition's scientists, the goal was to demystify, to pull the phenomenon down from the realm of spirits and measure it against the grid of European reason. For the indigenous guides warming their hands by the same fire, the lights were an integral part of a living, spiritual cosmology, a story that explained their world and their place within it. One sought to explain the mechanism, the other understood the meaning. Yet both perspectives, the calibrated journal and the ancient oral tradition, are threads in the same tapestry. Muller's precise records from Siberia provided some of the most consistent long-term data the emerging science of geomagnetism had ever seen, helping to anchor the aurora firmly in the natural world. At the same moment, the Evenk shaman's ritual acknowledged a deeper human truth, that some lights in the sky will always call to something beyond data, to the part of us that still feels small beneath a dancing heaven. In the silent expanse of the Siberian taiga, under a sky rippling with silent fire, the Enlightenment and the Eternal stood side by side, one taking notes, the other telling tales. The spring of 1789 hung heavy with a strange electricity over France. As bread prices soared and political pamphlets flooded the streets of Paris, the sky itself seemed to echo the growing unrest. In the months leading up to the storming of the Bastille, multiple accounts describe intense, blood-red auroral displays shimmering over the countryside and the capital. For a populace steeped in superstition and simmering with revolutionary fervor, this was not a scientific curiosity, it was a celestial headline. Diarists and newspaper correspondents wrote of the blood of the heavens, a crimson veil that many saw as an unmistakable portent of the blood that would soon flow in the streets. The symbolism was too potent, too perfectly aligned with the mounting tension to be ignored. In taverns and market squares, the glowing sky became a central topic of terrified gossip, interpreted as a divine warning or a revolutionary signal. The omen, however, was a blank slate for propaganda. For royalists clinging to the old order, the bloody aurora could be framed as a sign of God's wrath against the rising tide of insolence and rebellion, a warning to return to obedience. For the revolutionaries gathering in secret societies, the same crimson light could be spun as a beacon of change, a sign that the corrupt old world was burning away in a necessary, purifying fire. Imagine the scene in the weeks before July 14th, a restless citizen looking from a cramped garret window to see the familiar rooftops of Paris bathed in an unearthly red glow. That silent, rippling light would have felt like a confirmation of every fear and every hope, a cosmic drumroll preceding the explosion. The aurora became part of the revolution's emotional fuel, a shared visual experience that deepened the collective sense of living in historic, apocalyptic times. When the guillotine's blade later fell, many would recall those spring nights and nod grimly, believing the sky had written the script in advance. This final great medieval omen, arriving on the cusp of the modern age, proves that even as reason began to triumph, the human heart still looked to the heavens for a mirror, and in 1789 the mirror reflected fire. The crimson sky over revolutionary Paris was a final, spectacular gasp of the old world's fear. Less than a century later, the heavens staged a performance so vast it would shatter that ancient paradigm forever. In late August and early September 1859, the aurora borealis descended upon the planet with a ferocity never before recorded. It was seen in Havana, where tropical skies shimmered with crimson and emerald. It blazed over Hawaii and painted the nights over Santiago, Chile. In the Rocky Mountains, its light was so brilliant that gold miners awoke at 1 in the morning, believing dawn had come, and began making breakfast. For the first time in human history, a celestial event was witnessed in real time across the entire globe, a silent, crackling net of light thrown over the earth. This was the event that would finally, definitively, connect the dots scribbled by terrified monks and curious kings for over 1,000 years. The key was not just in the sky, but in a quiet observatory in England. On the morning of September 1st, the astronomer Richard Carrington was methodically sketching a massive group of sunspots through his telescope. Suddenly, two blinding beads of white light erupted from the darkened area. Carrington, astonished, rushed to fetch a witness. The intense flare lasted only 5 minutes, but its significance was eternal. He had just seen the trigger. About 17 hours later, the second and most violent wave of the auroral storm struck the Earth. This time, its power did not just paint the sky, it surged through the very veins of the new industrial age. Telegraph systems, the internet of the 19th century, went utterly mad. Operators in Boston and Philadelphia found they could send messages with the batteries disconnected, powered solely by the auroral currents flowing through the wires. Sparks flew from equipment, telegraph paper spontaneously caught fire, and some operators received sharp electric shocks. The world was suddenly wrapped in a planetary-scale circuit, and humanity's newest technology became a lightning rod for a force as old as the sun. This was the proof, irrefutable and electrifying. The fiery warriors, the bloody crosses, the great church beams of light. They were all signatures of our star's furious magnetism, written across the sensitive film of Earth's atmosphere. Carrington's observation provided the missing link, the solar cause to the terrestrial effect. The event that bears his name marks the precise moment the aurora ceased to be a divine portent and became a measurable physical phenomenon, the culmination of every medieval sighting that came before it. Those monks and chroniclers were not just telling ghost stories, they were logging data points in a centuries-long experiment, their quills recording the pulse of a star we are only now beginning to understand. The Carrington event was the final, dazzling piece of the puzzle. We have traveled from the blood-red crosses over Saxon England to the fire chariots of Korean kings, from the celestial lances that terrified crusaders to the great church beam that awed a monk. 25 historic sightings, each a flickering candle held up to a different moment in time, illuminating not just the sky, but the human soul gazing upward. These chronicles possess a remarkable dual power. First, they are exquisite windows into the medieval mind, a world where every flicker in the heavens was a direct communique from the divine, rich with symbols of war, judgment, and celestial armies. They capture the raw, visceral fear of a people who lived beneath a sky they believed was alive with intention. Second, and just as vital, they are priceless data for modern astrophysics. Each terrified description of a crimson sky over Baghdad or a fiery banner above London is a timestamp, a coordinate that helps scientists like Richard Carrington reconstruct the sun's ancient, furious heartbeat. The journey of understanding has been a long dawn from omen to wonder. We began by seeing dragons and angels in the light, and we ended by measuring the solar wind that paints them. Yet through it all, one thing has never faded: the awe, that deep, humbling sense that we are witnessing something greater than ourselves. So here is an invitation for you. We are entering a period of intense solar activity, a new solar maximum. In the coming years, the aurora will dance farther south, more vividly than it has in decades. Look up, step outside on a clear, dark night and watch the horizon. If you are lucky enough to see those silent curtains of light, remember the monks, the kings, and the chroniclers. You are seeing exactly what they saw, but now you hold the key to both the ancient fear and the modern wonder. Share what you see, tell us your stories, post your photos in the comments below. And if you want to join more journeys into the mysteries where history and science collide, subscribe for more. For in the end, these lights are more than a spectacle. They are a reminder, a fragile, beautiful thread connecting every human who has ever lifted their eyes to the dark, searching for meaning in the silent fire of the stars.